I believe that most parents have a favorite child, one who they care about just a bit more. Normally, it's not a big deal, but in my case, it became a matter of life or death. My mom had to choose between me and my sister, and she chose her because she was prettier than me. You see, my parents had me and my sister in their teens. We were poor farmers, and one night my dad couldn't take it anymore. He told my mom, "Fine, if I'm such an awful dad for not loving my daughter enough, then enjoy being a single mom." He walked out the door, and Mom waited weeks for him to come back, but he never did. So after she'd used up all her savings, she sat me down in private and said, "I can't afford to raise 2 children. I don't have the money for it, so I have to choose between you and your sister, and I choose her." I didn't understand what she meant, but I started crying. She continued, "Unlike you, your sister is pretty. She has a better chance of finding a husband one day. And I can't let her become homeless because who knows what men would do to her if they found her. Meanwhile, no guy would ever want to touch you." So my mom didn't just abandon me that day. She also told me I was ugly and that no man would ever want me. I was just 9, and watching my mom leaving me back in our hut completely broke my heart. They left to take the train to La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. Now, this all happened more than 30 years ago. Back then, Bolivia was even poorer than it is today. Famine was widespread, and many kids suffered from malnourishment. I think it's a wonder that I'm still alive. Heck, my mom must have thought I would die of starvation when she left me behind. It was a death sentence. But I wasn't mad at my mom. Instead, I blamed myself for being born so ugly that not even my parents cared about me. I wanted to die, I really did. But after a while, my hunger made me leave the hut in the end in search of food. We lived near the Bolivian rainforest, so it was hot outside, and after walking down small trails for more than a day, I got so dehydrated I couldn't walk straight anymore. Only when it started raining, I could catch some water in a leaf and drink. Otherwise, I would have died. I kept walking for days until I reached a farm. A couple lived there with 2 daughters. They let me stay on the condition that I would take over the farm work of one of their daughters so she could go to school. I accepted the offer because otherwise I would have starved to death. But soon, there was a problem. The parents could only afford to send one daughter to school, and that made the other daughter quite envious. She told me, "It's not fair. I'm the older daughter, and I should be going to school. My parents only chose her because she's smarter than me. I'll be stuck on this farm for the rest of my life while she will get a job in the city, make lots of money, and start her own family. I hate her." That all sounded too familiar to me, but I had my own problems. I had to work hard from morning to sunset, and I was bitter at my own mom. I wondered how she could have chosen my sister over me just because she was better looking. It was so unfair. I dreamed a lot about going to the big city myself and finding a good job so I could provide for my parents and sister. That way, I thought I could show my mom that she had made a mistake, that she should have chosen me instead of my sister. That's why I woke up every morning an hour before my farm work started and went through the other girls' school books. I tried to learn as much as I could in hope that one day I could find a better job. But the girl who wasn't allowed to go to school had enough after 3 years. She told me, "You have to leave." "Leave? Why? And where shall I go?" "I don't care, but either you go or I'll make you go." She was threatening me, but I didn't know what to expect. When I woke up the next morning, I went to study with the girls' school books again, but noticed that someone had poured water over all of the notes and made them unreadable. I panicked because I knew the parents would blame me for it. So I woke up the mean girl and said, "I know you did this. You think your parents will throw me out because I spilled water over your sister's notes?" "Look," she responded, and pulled a few banknotes from under her pillow. "I stole this from my parents' savings pot. It's enough money for you to get to La Paz and have food for a few weeks. Move into an orphanage or something. This is my family, so F off." I thought about it for a moment. La Paz was the capital of Bolivia, and I knew that's where my mom and sister went. Finally, I took the money because I wasn't sure if I'd ever get another chance to leave that dump. When I arrived in the capital, I was intimidated by all the big buildings. I was a farm girl after all. I somehow figured out the address of a children's home, but when I got there, I saw 2 tattooed guys aged around 16 at the entry who looked like thugs. I got so scared that I went into a nearby hotel instead. I asked the receptionist if she knew a cheap place I could stay at safely and long-term. I told her about the 2 scary-looking guys at the entry of the orphanage and how I was worried that they might hurt me. But she burst out laughing and said, "No offense, but you aren't pretty enough to have to worry about some guy hurting you. You should be lucky if a guy shows any interest in you at all." Honestly, I don't understand why so many people think it's okay to be mean to ugly people like me. I have the same feelings as anyone else. Anyway, I ended up having no choice but to go to the orphanage home. And there, I learned an important lesson. If you are ugly, you are basically invisible to other people. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but many of the kids there came from violent backgrounds. So I was glad to be ignored by them. Oh, and back then we had no smartphones. All I could do to fight boredom was study and read books. That's how I quickly caught up to other kids' education levels, even though I've never been to school. And I realized that to get a job, all I needed was to be really good at one thing, and I chose English. That's how I got a job as a tourist guide. And even though my salary was only $10 a month, I was business savvy and offered the tourists I met private cooking classes with traditional Bolivian foods, and that got me a good extra income on top of my salary. I was able to rent my own small room before I had even turned 20. Suddenly, I felt the urge to find my mom and show her what I had accomplished, and that she had made a mistake by choosing my sister. Sure, I still resented her for abandoning me, but I also wondered if she felt bad about it. Well, La Paz is a big city, and it took me many months to find them. I finally did it by calling universities, asking if my sister was studying there. When I found her, I waited in front of the entry for her to go home and follow her. To my surprise, she and Mom lived in a middle-class apartment building, one that was much better than mine. How could they afford this place? I was incredibly nervous, but went inside and knocked on their door. My mom opened and was shocked to see me, but not nearly as shocked as I was, because right behind her stood Dad. They didn't seem excited to see me. They didn't even greet me. So I started with, "I'm sorry if I'm disturbing you. I just wanted to say hi." My dad rolled his eyes while Mom looked away. I could tell she felt ashamed. "It's okay if you don't want to talk to me," I said. "But can I at least shortly see my sister? I haven't seen her in over a decade." "She isn't here, and it's better if you just go away." He closed the door, and 1,000 questions ran through my head. Had my dad abandoned us back then because of me? Was I too ugly? Is that why my mom left me behind, so she could move back in with my dad who didn't want me? It hurt to be rejected by my own parents for a second time. But I knew the danger of falling into self-pity. It can destroy your life, and I'm a survivor, not a victim. Sometimes I cry, but the next morning I wipe my tears and move on. I'm almost 40 now, and it's been decades since I've seen my old family, but I've built a new one. Some people would say my husband is just as ugly as me, but who cares? We love each other. We trust each other. Some people may look ugly on the outside, but the inside matters so much more. Hey!
Okay, most people won't believe the story, but it really did happen, and it was even in the news and everything. So, my mom always told me that I was too fat, even though I was one of the skinniest girls in my class. She said I had to become thinner if I wanted other people to like me, and she would weigh me every day after school and scream at me if I put on a pound. To make things worse, my mom always forced me to participate in beauty pageants because she wanted me to be the most beautiful and most perfect girl in the world. However, I hated it so much because I always came last. It was so embarrassing. But my mom believed that the reason I kept losing was because I was too fat. And that's why she stopped me from eating anything at home, and she even put a lock on the fridge. She literally tried to starve me, but it didn't work because I ended up just eating more inside my school cafeteria. When she realized that her plan wasn't working, she decided to do something terrible. One day I got home and my mom was standing there with a weird look on her face. She told me to close my eyes and swallow whatever she put into my mouth, or she would punish me worse than ever before. I knew that she wasn't joking, so although I had no idea what it was, I immediately swallowed it down. It tasted gross, but Mom gave me some more water and told me to go watch TV. I felt like puking, but I was too afraid of what Mom would do, so I held it down. A few weeks later, I was watching cartoons when my stomach started to ache. It was the worst pain I had ever felt, and I begged my mom to do something. But she just told me to stop being a baby. The pain got worse, though, when I kept on crying and moaning. My mom screamed at me to stop making so much noise, but I couldn't help it. In the end, it got so bad, I called the ambulance on my phone. I didn't care what my mom would do. I just wanted the pain to stop. When they arrived, Mom was super angry, but the ambulance drivers took one look at me and rushed me to the hospital. They immediately gave me a gastric lavage, and you won't believe what came out. The doctor had to reach into my throat to pull out one massive worm. It was at least as long as my arm. It was so horrifying that I still have nightmares about it. The doctors looked shocked and asked me what I had been eating. At first I was too afraid to say, but eventually I admitted that my mom had told me to close my eyes and swallow something without telling me what it was. Well, it turns out that my mom had fed me a tapeworm. She said she only wanted to help me lose weight, but now I know that she was nuts. I could have died because sometimes tapeworms go through your blood into your brain and kill you. I was only 12 when all this happened, and I haven't seen my mom since. To be honest, I don't ever want to see her again. Now I'm 18 and my mom is still in prison for what she did. After my mom was arrested, my aunt and uncle adopted me. I'm so lucky to have them. They don't care what weight I am. They love me for me.